Hello, Sarah Crawford here with Sitawi Life Coaching. This video today is about making mistakes. It's helpful as adults to take a look at our relationship to making mistakes and our beliefs and patterns around making mistakes because it can make or break our relationships with other people. It can impact career opportunities, and most importantly, it can affect your relationship with yourself. And so I invite you to begin to think about what is your relationship to making mistakes, and what are some of your beliefs about it? What are some of your patterns with it? And I invite you to release the shame that may come up with this topic. I believe strongly that shame can keep us stuck and, into some avoidance patterns or distraction. Because it's uncomfortable. And it's often not very productive long term to stay stuck in a shame pattern around it. But I notice a lot of people have it. And so I want you to think about this topic as you listen to this video with that in mind, and permission to set shame or guilt down as you think about it, and just be able to take a look at it from a more heart-centered and logical place. Okay, with all of that said, something to first think about: do you see mistakes as something normal for adults, kids? Is it something maybe just kids should do, and at a certain age you should know better? Do you believe that mistakes are something to judge? Or does it depend on the type of mistake? Or does it depend on if others are affected by it, or who is affected by it? We all have patterns of behavior, and this is something that I work with people often on as a life coach. And our patterns of behavior, they tend to be very predictable, which makes it easy to take a look at what they actually are and then to work with them because we are such predictable beings. And so some of the common patterns that we see around making mistakes are maybe we cover it up, or sometimes people lie about making mistakes. Sometimes we avoid addressing them. That tends to be one of my patterns. Sometimes we get stuck in self-shaming, like I mentioned earlier, or we overly apologize. Maybe we assume other people won't forgive us. Maybe we get arrogant and defensive about it, or make excuses for our behavior. And maybe we own up to it and we apologize for it and take responsibility for it, and move on. And as a life coach, in the coaching that I do, we propose that a healthy relationship to making mistakes is ownership without judgment. Okay, ownership without judgment. And what I want to say about making mistakes as well is we generally learned pretty young how we respond to making mistakes. It's a pattern that we took on from very young on, and we generally learn it from our parents, for better or for worse. And so there's always an opportunity, as we become adults, as we get older, to take a look at what that is, and maybe shift it if it would be more productive and serving for you to do so. So I want to share a little write-up that I found online. It was just, some screenshot on Facebook. I don't even know where it originally came from. It's one of those things that was just shared with, it's hard to tell the original source. It looks like Prolixia is the name of the person that shared it. Again, I don't even know what platform it's on, and I apologize for not having the exact source, but I found it really helpful, and I want to read a couple parts of this to you. So they're talking about how to apologize. And as kids, we're made to say sorry, but that alone is not a proper apology, they're suggesting here. They say you have to say sorry without qualifications and acknowledge what you did wrong and the impact it had on the other person. So acknowledging what you did wrong and the impact. And then you have to make amends, or at least commit to not doing that thing again. So here's some examples. I'm sorry I made you late. They're saying is not an apology because it doesn't acknowledge what you actually did wrong or the real impact on the other person. And so variations on I'm sorry if you think I made you late are just insulting because it puts the blame on the party you're pretend apologizing to. Or just I'm sorry doesn't quite cut it. It's not a magic word and it sounds like you do not know or care what happened, but just want the blame to disappear. And so it's an interesting take. We're often just told, to say sorry, but are we ever actually taught how? And so then they propose this particular example of apologizing, and I think it's a pretty effective one. So here goes. I'm sorry that I forgot to leave the key for you like we agreed. I understand that made you late for your appointment, and that must have been embarrassing for you. That's my fault. I've put a reminder on my phone so I won't forget in the future. I'm going to read that again. I'm sorry that I forgot to leave the key for you like we agreed. I appreciate that I understand that made you late for your appointment, and that must have been embarrassing for you. That's my fault. I've put a reminder on my phone so I won't forget in the future. And so in this particular example, they're acknowledging the specific act that they did and how that impacted the other person, and really getting present to what really happened, right? They were probably embarrassed being late. They were late, yes, but then that probably was embarrassing for them as well. And imagine how it would be to receive that apology yourself from someone else, where they've really been thoughtful as to the impact of their mistake on you. And imagine, just in comparison, receiving an apology of simply, I'm sorry. It's like, okay, fair. And that's the typical thing that we receive is the I'm sorry, hopefully. Sometimes we don't even get that. But to actually have someone thoughtfully think about what the real impact was, it's meaningful. It really, it's very loving and heart-centered and meaningful. What else do I want to say about this? We can often think about the idea of intention versus impact when we look at making mistakes. We generally, as people, do not set out or with an intention of hurting someone, embarrassing someone, making a mistake. But we have to acknowledge that it is the impact that can sometimes happen. And it doesn't mean we're wrong or bad. It means that we did something that had an impact. My friend Tujer Lee, he's another coach in the Chicago area, and he talks about acknowledging the misaligned action. So there was an intention, there was an impact, and then between those two was a misaligned action. And to be able to speak to that can be really helpful in acknowledging and repairing relationships or damage done. And so in the example with the keys, the misaligned action is, not having a reminder to remember to leave the key out for the other person. And so that's the thing to address and then to work on. And not only is this something that comes up in our personal relationships all the time, but it also comes up very often professionally. And there was there's an article that I've read on the idea of integrity, and they talk about being able to implement integrity within workplaces increases productivity by like 300 to 500%. And one of the reasons why is that it builds trust with people, and it has a lot to do with how we relate to promises made and promises kept or promises broken, and how we address those within our companies and within our relationships. And it goes back to, again, being able to address, what it is that we didn't do that we said we would do, what the impact was, inquiring. If you don't know the impact, ask, what ended up happening because of that mistake that I made, and then how can I help to make that right, and then taking a look at what you're able to do, and then taking action on that. We say in the coaching world that integrity is thoughts, no, I'm messing it up. Thoughts, words, and actions aligned. So what we're thinking is aligned with what we're doing, and with what we're saying as well, how we're speaking. So I hope this gives you something to think about. If you want to take this a little bit further, what I would invite you to do is to spend some time with a journal and, think about, what is your relationship to making mistakes? What are your beliefs about making mistakes? And then what are some of your patterns with making mistakes? And then see if there's any opportunity for you to recognize sooner when you're making some mistakes, and then being able to shift how you're being about those mistakes. In summary, the last thing I want to say is, how we be with ourselves around our own mistakes affects how we be with other people in their mistakes. It really starts at home with you always, right? And I always invite us to bring in more compassion, more self-compassion, rather than the shame and judgment, because from shame and judgment, there's not a lot of movement or shift that can happen, or change that can happen. But being able to just recognize and acknowledge, hey, I'm making a mistake and I'm learning, and there's a lot of opportunity in the world right now to apologize for mistakes we've made, or to acknowledge when we've made them, and just do better. It's, we don't have to change people in the sense of, we can't change what we've done, but we can learn and grow, and we're always learning and growing. And I don't think that people expect us to know everything. But it's helpful to learn and grow and do better when we know better. And so finding some phrases to use in scenarios like that can be really helpful too. Gosh, thanks so much for pointing that out. I'll have to think about that for a while. I didn't recognize that. Might be a helpful phrase. So certainly, there's a lot to get heated about in life right now. There's a lot of division happening amongst people. And this is one way that we can help to bridge that divide and bring more love back in. So I hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks for listening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you soon for another video. Bye.